Tonight's sermon is titled The Long Way Home. If you're taking notes, if you're not taking notes, you might be glad to know that anyways. The long way home. I don't know about you, but when we go on vacation, we are much more likely to take a scenic drive on the outbound trip when we're on the front end of the vacation. But once we've been away from home for 5, 6, 7 days, we're ready to come home. And when we're ready to come home, we want to go home. We don't want to take time to do the scenic stroll and to get off the beaten path and go see the sights. We want to get home. I want to get back to my bed. I don't know about you, but that's kind of the way I feel at the end of a week-long vacation. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and although our interstates don't run in straight lines, they are pretty efficient in the way they're mapped out. Chris Huff says, no, not if you go through Atlanta, right? And so at the end of the trip, now we just get out our phone and home and we go. But it used to be in the olden days, you had to get out this big thing called an atlas, and you had to look up, and Perry Fogel, did you still use an atlas when you do all your travels, or is it all digital for you now? You see, all right, so we still have some old timers, and I'm included in that too. I use GPS a lot, but I have an atlas in the car, just in case. You never know when that phone battery is going to die. But at the end of the vacation, you want to get home, you pull out that atlas, you pull out the GPS, and you say, all right, what's the most direct way to get home, right? If you take the most direct route, you might miss out on the beauty of the scenic route. But that's a risk that you're willing to take. That's something that you're willing to give up because you're ready. But you might miss out on the experiences along the way. That barbecue restaurant that's way off the beaten path, if you're in a hurry to get home, you're not going to get to go there. And that might be a mistake. But the bigger mistake was that you should have gone there on your outbound trip. Now, where am I going with all of this? Well, the point is that sometimes, even though we don't do this in our vacations and in our driving, in our travels, sometimes we learn that the long way home is actually best. And I think we see that in the Bible. I had you open to Exodus chapter 13. Because the people of Israel, when it was time for them to leave Egypt and to go to the promised land, they took a very long way to get there. Their path was unusually long. In fact, as the birds fly, it was about 3 times longer than it should have been had they taken the shortest route. Having been in Egypt for about 400 years, if there was anybody who was ready to leave and go home, it was the people of Israel. They've been enslaved, in bondage in Egypt. You think about how weary they must have been, how much they had suffered as slaves in that nation. They were longing for home. And finally, Moses, by the power of God, he comes to their rescue. And he's going to bring them out, lead them out of the land of Egypt, and take them to the promised land. But God doesn't take them on the shortest route. He doesn't pull out the atlas and show them the interstates that go directly to the land of Canaan. He says, no, I'm going to take you a different way. And I'm going to take you a way that takes much longer and makes you travel much farther. Look at Exodus chapter 13 and verse 17. Exodus 13, verse 17. Now, when Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was near, even though it was shorter, even though it was faster. That's not the route that God wanted them to take. Now, if you look on this map and you follow those lines, that's the path that the people of Israel did take, all right? So if I can come over here and show us this journey that they took. They start up here in Egypt, of course, and they start to come out this direction, and you see that they go down here, down the Arabian Peninsula. It's believed that Mount Sinai is somewhere down here. They go down to Sinai, they start to come back up, and then they cross over to the east side, and then they're going to come back over eventually to the west side of the Jordan River. Now, what Exodus 13 and verse 17 says is they left Egypt, and the fastest thing they could have done would be to go along the coastline right up through here to Canaan, which is right up there. But that's not what they did. As the birds fly from here to Jerusalem is about 200 miles. Instead, doing all of this travel, they go about 650 miles. Why? Why does God send them on this indirect and much longer route? Well, there's a couple of answers that I believe come from the text. Now, we know, being the Bible students that we are, we know that their travel took a lot longer than it should have because of their lack of faith, and they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and all the kids who have been in the Bible drill, they're doing this right now, all right? They've been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years because of their lack of faith. You remember they sent the spies into the land to investigate, and 10 of them came back and said, there's no way we can take it. Joshua and Caleb were the only two who said, yes, we can. Let's trust God. Let's go. And the people went with the 10 spies who didn't have any faith, and because of that, God made them wander in that wilderness for 40 years. But even if you take out that 40-year punishment period, this route is still going to take them a long time. So why does God do that? God gives us two reasons in this text. Number one, the Philistines. His people are not ready for the Philistines. Keep reading verse 17. When Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was near. Because God said, the people might change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So the shortest route takes them right through the Philistine territory. But at this time in history, the Philistines are a pretty strong nation. In fact, at the end of the 40-year period, after they wander in the wilderness for 40 years, we're going to read again and again and again that the Philistines are a continual thorn in the side of the Israelites because of their strong army. So I think it would be safe for us to presume that 40 years prior to that, they had a strong army. This is a developed nation. They have a strong fighting military, and God says, my people are not ready. If they go into Philistine territory, do you think the Philistines are going to let this horde of people, over 1 million people, just walk through their territory? No. When you see that volume of people coming through your land, you come out with swords and spears and you say, why are you here? And God knows that's exactly what the Philistines will do. And he doesn't want his people to see that. If the Philistines defeated Israel just weeks after their emancipation from Egypt, what's going to happen? The Israelites are going to lose confidence. Many of them are going to be slaughtered when they go to fight the Philistines, and they're going to turn back to Egypt. Yeah, we were slaves, but at least we were alive. At least we had food to eat. It wasn't good, but at least we had food. And so they're going to become discouraged. They're going to go back. Now, I know what you're thinking. Now, wait a minute. God's with them, right? I mean, God can beat the Philistines if he wants to, right? Aren't the Israelites going to have to face the Egyptians on the very next page at the Red Sea? Yes, both of those things are true. But do you think when the Israelites were in Egypt as slaves that the Pharaoh was saying to the men of Israel, here's some swords and some spears. You guys go practice your military powers. I think that'd be a great idea. No. They don't have any military expertise. They were slaves. The last thing Pharaoh would have done would be to train them in military exercises. So they may have swords and spears, but they have no idea how to use them. And so they're coming out and they're immediately going to face the Philistines, who are pretty good with swords and spears. Bad idea. Yes, if God was with them, he could find a way to make it work. But the people of Israel would have still had to fight if they went up against the Philistines. But you know, when you look at the next page at chapter 14, when Pharaoh changes his mind and he gets on his chariot and all the horses and his army, and they start chasing after the people of Israel, and he backs them up to the waters of the Red Sea. You remember the story. God parts the waters. The Israelites go through on dry land to the other side. Pharaoh and the Egyptians go chasing it after them. God collapses the waters, killing the Egyptians. How many swords and spears did the Israelites have to use? Exactly. They're not ready for that. And so God says, we're going to go about this a different way. Reason number 2, and I think the bigger reason. Israel needs to learn to trust God. Look at chapter 13 and verse 20. Then they set out from Succoth and camped in Etham on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. The point of that is God is leading his people as they travel. He is out before them, guiding them, whether it's be this cloud or via this pillar of fire. They know God is there. He's in front of us. He's leading us, which is, I think, important. He's not behind them, pushing them. And that's kind of the way it is in our lives as Christians, isn't it? God is out there in front of us. He's leading us. He's guiding us. And he is saying, come, follow me. He's not behind us, pushing us by compulsion against our will. And so God says to this nation, you follow me and I will lead you to safety. And as we keep going through the book of Exodus, that's exactly what we see God doing. In chapter 14, he divides the sea and he lets them cross over that sea. He protects them from the Egyptians. In chapter 15, as well as chapter 17, he provides water for them when they're out in the desert and there is no water. Where are we going to get water to drink? God takes care of that. In chapter 16, he gives them manna and meat to eat. He provides for their food and their water. In chapter 20, he's going to give them the 10 commandments. And he's going to give them the law as we go throughout much of the rest of the book of Exodus and on into Leviticus. What's God doing? He is providing for their every need. And as they're wandering in the wilderness, he made it so that their clothes don't wear out, that their shoes never had to be resoled. He takes care of them. And as they're wandering with him out in front, he's providing, he's leading, and guiding them. He is shaping them. He's educating them. He is allowing them to unlearn the ways of Egypt so that they can learn his ways. Okay? They needed to learn to trust God and to learn from God. Now let's make it personal. Here's a point that I want us to consider. Sometimes in our lives, God makes us take the long way home. Just like he did the people of Israel. Things may not always be quick and easy for us. Maybe he makes us go through a journey that's a lot longer and a lot more difficult. Now, why does he do that? Now, before I answer that question, let me say this. I am not a believer, and we talked about this briefly with our high school kids this afternoon. I'm not a believer in this, God has a special, unique plan just for me idea that's so popular. I don't see that anywhere in the New Testament. But I do believe in God's providence. I do believe that God works in the lives of his people. And he probably does that a lot more than we recognize, and certainly a lot more than we give him credit for. Now, I know that it's hard to pinpoint and say, well, that was God's doing, and we don't have the capacity to do that. But, I've had several coincidences in my life that don't seem to be coincidences. You know what I mean? It seems that those are God's provisions. That is God working in my life, answering prayers, bringing about things in my life that are good for me, even if they may be hard, even if they may be challenging. That's God shaping me and helping me. So sometimes we have plans for life. Maybe it's career plans. It's a path that we want to choose to follow in our occupation. Maybe it's plans for our family. And those plans may be delayed. They may be slightly changed. They may be derailed altogether. We make these plans, and sometimes God leads us in a different direction. Why does he do that? Well, let me suggest to you that he does that to us for the same 2 reasons that he did the people of Israel. He does that to us, number 1, because we're not ready to face the Philistines. You know what I mean? God understands that there are some things in our lives that we, at this point in life, may not be ready for. There may be battles that we are not quite yet ready for, and he knows that. You want a passage? 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. I want to look at verse 13. No temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. And God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, so that you may be able to endure it. God will not let you be tempted beyond what you are able to handle, able to deal with. God knows our spiritual strength. He knows our wisdom. He knows our knowledge. He knows our capacity to handle the situations that life can bring. And so perhaps he delays our plans. Maybe he postpones our plans. Maybe he cancels them altogether because he knows what we are capable of handling and not capable of handling. It seems to me that if we are thrust into a situation that we're not ready for, like the Israelites would have been going into the Philistine territory, if we are thrust into a situation that we are not ready for, that's going to do a couple of things, potential things. Number one, it might open doors for temptations to come in. We might be overwhelmed in moments of weakness. And when those temptations come along, whatever they may be, we may give in to those temptations. Let me just give you a biblical example. This is a biblical example of somebody who was ready for the challenges that he would face. Think about Joseph. Mistreated by his brothers, sold into slavery, eventually through the providence of God, he makes his way to a pretty powerful position in the land of Egypt. He has people who are working under him who have to take his orders and his commands. And then there's this woman, Potiphar's wife, who comes along and she tries to seduce Joseph. He is given a position of power, prominence in the land. And it seems that when people are in such positions, temptations just come naturally. Somebody's always trying to trip you up. Somebody's always trying to take advantage of you in some way or make you slip and fall in some way. And Potiphar's wife comes along and she offers that seductive temptation, and Joseph was ready for it. But I wonder if Joseph was not the man of character that we know him to be. What if he had weaker faith and weaker character? I wonder if God would have let him make it to that position in Egypt to begin with. Now, I don't know the answer to that. But I do think 1 Corinthians 10 tells me something about that. So the first thing that may happen if we are thrust into this situation that we're not ready for, it may open doors for temptation. But number two, if that happens and we give in to the temptation, it may plant seeds of doubt, which leads to a decrease in our faith. And that's obviously the last thing that we want, and it's certainly the last thing that God wants for us. And so God may look at our plans and maybe our dreams and what we want, and he may say, you know what? You're not ready. So we're going to push pause, and we're going to wait. You're not ready to face the Philistines. Now the second reason, and the same reason he did for the people of Israel, and I think this follows from the previous. We have to learn to trust God more so that we can become ready to meet the Philistines. Think about the people of Israel. When they first leave Egypt, they're not ready to fight the Philistines. And so God takes them on this 40-year journey through the wilderness, through the desert, where their circumstances at many times were bleak. And yet through the whole way, God says, I'm here. I'm giving you what you need. Trust me. I'll provide for you. Put your faith in me. You are strong because of me. And then when it's time to invade the land and start their conquest, what do? I mean, by and large, they go in and just slaughter everybody. They clean house. Why? Because God is with them. Because Joshua is there leading them, and he says, I trust God, so should you. Let's go do what God has told us to do. All of that time. It took 40 years, but what was happening? Faith was growing. Faith was building. Now, I know it's a different group of people. I know that. Different group of people that left Egypt. But don't miss the point. It took 40 years for that next generation to come along, to have strong faith, to put their trust in God so that when it came time to do the work that needed to be done, they were ready for it. And so it may be that way with us. You know, we trust God now, yes, but maybe we don't trust Him to the degree that we need to in order to complete this journey that we are ready to embark upon. And so God is going to make us wander in the wilderness a little bit. And He's going to patiently teach us and mold us and shape us. How's He going to do that? He's going to do it through worship, through fellowship, through spiritual growth, through personal devotion, through interaction with God's people, the people that He brings into our lives who teach us and push us and encourage us even more. And all this time we're growing. We're getting stronger and stronger so that when the Philistines come along, now we're ready. Go with me to Proverbs 3. Proverbs 3. Well-known passage, especially if you've ever graduated high school. But look with me at verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Do you think any of the Israelites came out of Egypt and said, Moses, it'd be a lot faster if we went this way? Don't lean on your own understanding. God has purposes for taking you the long way home that you may not be aware of. Lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. And you know, oftentimes we stop there at verse 6, but we need to pull verse 7 into this too. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Those verses all go together. If we trust in the Lord with all of our heart, and we're not leaning on our own understanding, and if we are acknowledging Him in all of our ways, then what does that mean? It means, verse 7, that we are not wise in our own eyes. And we know that. We don't consider ourselves to know better than God. But God knows what it is that we need and what is best for us. I think about Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9, where God said, my thoughts are not your thoughts. And the people of Israel learned that. Boy, it'd be a lot faster if we went this way. Yeah, but my thoughts are not your thoughts. I have purposes you may not know about. And so it is with all of us. Heaven is our ultimate destination. And depending on our age and depending on our time and chance, it may be near, it may be far. But as we journey there, God is shaping us, molding us, teaching us, making us stronger. And one day we're going to reach that promised land. Now before I close, I want to say one thing. I got an email probably 6 months ago from Alan Mosley. He said, hey, I got a sermon idea. By the way, I love it when I get emails like that. So I got a sermon idea. Here's what I want you to do. And this was it. This verse, I've been reading, thinking about this verse. I want you to do something with it. So after 5 or 6 months, I finally went online and stole somebody else's sermon and came in. No, I'm kidding. But I put it on the shelf for a while because I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't exactly sure where I wanted to go with it. But I want to say something about that email. And I want you to listen carefully. Your shepherds love you. They care about you. They think about you every day. They pray for you every day. And they send emails like that to me. They say things like that to me from time to time because they're worried about you. Because they're worried about our needs and the things that we need to hear as the flock of God in this place. Please be thankful that we have 4 men who lead us like that. Okay? Now that's a separate point, but an important one nonetheless. Jesus, draw me ever nearer. I love the chorus of this song. May this journey bring a blessing. As you sing the words of this song, note how they tie in with what we discussed tonight. If you need to become a Christian or if you need to come back to the Lord, we invite you to come. We're ready to help you if you'll come as we stand and sing.